Extraverted feeling judgment, FE, is the shadow function of the INTP, being by far the least developed of his faculties. Indeed, mature use of FE typically doesn't begin to take shape until well into middle age. Feelings and emotions are regarded with suspicion and perhaps fear by the INTP, and he may be keen to avoid considering or showing them. At the same time, he may experience a certain fascination for the emotional world, but he is desperate to depersonalize any thoughts on that area. He is compelled to subject his emotions to continual analysis, the TI core literally suppressing the FE shadow, attacking FE with accusations of irrationality. He resists letting his feelings go, fearing that to do so would be to relinquish control to an unknown force. He believes emotions to be of a lesser substance than logic, and his natural goal would be to conquer his emotions with pure rationality. Much of the above demonstrates the immature and underdeveloped approach with which the INTP meets his emotional side. In reality, the extroverted nature of the INTP's feeling judgment means that his emotions, when visible, are pretty direct and easy to assess. Since the INTP normally wishes to hide his emotions, when they do come out, they do so in outbursts with an almost childlike innocence. There is a sense of all or nothing, and, when visible, there is nothing enigmatic about the feelings of an INTP. Indeed, shadow functions always seem pretty raw and basic. When making on-the-spot decisions while extroverting with another person, the shadow phase is often temporarily exposed on the front line. Its immature nature may then result in an inadequate decision being made. The INTP may regret this later when the TI core has analyzed the events. Hence, INTPs tend to resist being forced to make quick decisions, for they know that their FE judgment is their Achilles heel. However, the resistance is sometimes weakened when NE jumps in to back up the FE. The accuracy of the intuitive insight then becomes crucial if the INTP is to avoid fatal errors. It is interesting to observe that the external world of the INTP involves a very free-spirited NE-FE partnership, while the internal world is a very clinical detail structure analysis TISI combination. Hence, the outward behavior of an INTP can contrast strongly with his introspective world. For the INTP, emotions are seen as something mysterious and as uncontrollable as they are unalterable. Hence, the root of the fear of emotions is the fear that they cannot be controlled. Hence, when an INTP does finally respond emotionally to something, his emotions are indeed left uncontrolled, raw and open. However, when witnessing the emotional response of another person, the INTP intensely resists any similar emotion of his own. An example of this is when watching a weepy cinema film in which some heart-wrenching scene is being shown. The INTP despises the attempt by the filmmaker to influence his emotions and is more likely to sneer than cry. This response has nothing to do with arrogance, however. Rather, it is the INTP defensively avoiding exposing what he knows to be his weak point. Where an INTP may experience his own emotional response during a film is when he has had the chance to consider consequences of an element of the film. Hence, emotional response to media input usually occurs with a certain independence of will, which could appear enigmatic to others. The mystery of emotion is also evidenced in the INTP's use of music. He always chooses to listen to music which suits his current emotional state, be it aggression, warmth, excitement, relaxation or whatever. Hence, the emotional state is assumed to be an unchangeable, mysterious property of himself. It is easier to choose appropriate music than to attempt to influence this. People with introverted feeling, FI, however, will deliberately choose to listen to music which helps them change and improve their mood. INTPs could never do that. They feel an unpleasant sense of disharmony whenever a music style clashes with their emotional state. Indeed, it is remarkable how much attention they pay to their emotions when music is involved. Sexuality is another important area which brings out the FE shadow of the INTP. Sexuality fascinates INTPs in a similar way to music. Both have an emotional core which does not entirely yield to analysis. Sexual feelings often clash with the INTP's desire to control and understand his universe. They also clash with the desire for detachment and keeping a distance. but sexuality is the one thing whose natural power can break through any type dynamics. Hence, sexuality can play a big role in balancing the INTP's functionality. However, the INTP's natural approach to sexuality will still have true-to-type elements. He will be keen to understand and categorize his sexual responses. He will be keen to see first the generalities of male and femaleness before any personal references are made. Nevertheless, in an intimate relationship, the extroverted nature of the feeling judgment leads to a beneficial openness and empathic directness in responding to the partner's needs, providing the healthy development of the FE function is encouraged. Indeed, for many INTPs, an intimate relationship is the only place where the FE shadow can really develop fruitfully. The inferior nature of the FE shadow shows itself, otherwise, in the lack of ability to show active empathy with people undergoing strong emotions. If he wishes to encourage the emotional person, the INTP tends to resort to giving T-based solutions to the problems involved. Often, the INTP does not really know how to empathize and may feel discomfort and helplessness, especially when he understands the rational basis for the emotions. He may become frustrated that the person remains unhappy in spite of hearing his T-based solutions. Much worse is when the emotional person appears to be being irrational. INTPs detest irrational emotion above all things. INTPs must take a very wide berth around people who appear to be irrationally, outwardly emotional. INTPs are very sensitive to such a trait and fear the potential excesses of the emotional attacks which do not yield to a defense based on logic. In a similar way, INTPs dislike being in an atmosphere of emotional disharmony. If they need to say something unpleasant to someone close to them, they would prefer to avoid this task for fear of the disharmony that may result. This results from the INTP's fear that he does not have the emotional competence to deal with disharmony. INTPs never like doing something until they know they can do it. The best cure for this reticence is experience, to express his feelings, to live through disharmony and come out the other side with greater experience of his emotional side. The feeling shadow is the fear center of the INTP. He rarely fears any factual thing in the outside world, at least not things that will be encountered in normal day-to-day living. Logic stipulates that external objects or people which threaten can always potentially be dealt with by instigating an active defense strategy. Of course, the possibility of being left truly helpless leaves the INTP cold, for once the TI core is defeated, the inferior FE can offer little comfort. Resigned acceptance of the unacceptable is an anathema for INTPs. His typical response to helplessness is to hate the world which has produced it. However, the greatest fears of an INTP are usually ideas generated within his own mind. The problem is that the TI axis is capable of conceiving very unpleasant ideas, which may be far from reality and even irrational. Ideas and possibilities assume so much importance in the mind of an INTP that they can override a common-sense factual grasp on reality. Since the emotional response to an unpleasant idea is based on an underdeveloped function, it may also fail to bring a return to common sense. The net result is the fear that ideas alone may lead to self-destruction. This fear is irrational and is a cry of help from the feeling shadow when being overdominated by the TI axis. This problem can be overcome when more balanced type dynamics result from increasing maturity.